We have three speakers that will present this morning, and we will, I just want to do the introductions first. I'm going to invite first Brent, Todd, City Councilor from Ward 1 to come up. Brent has been Concord City Councilor for Ward 1 Penacook since 2014. He serves as council representative to the city's Transportation Policy Advisory Committee, the Parking Committee, and Conservation Committee. He's a founding member and board member of the Penacook Village Association, and he founded and presided over Concord 250, a nonprofit organization that supported and promoted the 250th anniversary of the City of Concord back in 2015. He was board president of Concord 2020, a citizen involvement group that supported smart growth vision throughout Concord, and everybody's familiar with 2020. So thank you, Councilor Todd, for being here this morning. Our second speaker will be Suzi Pegg. Suzi is Economic Development Director for the City of Concord. She is a native of Sheffield, England. She moved to the United States in 2000 and became an American citizen in 2015. During her tenure as Vice President of International Business Development for the Pittsburgh Regional Alliance, she developed bilateral business alliances between southwestern Pennsylvania and counterparts in Asia and Europe. She moved to the City of Concord in 2017 to take the position of Economic Development Director, and her role is to implement a robust economic development plan for the Concord region, the focus of which will aim at, to support and enhance the current business base in addition to attracting new businesses from target sectors. Our third speaker will be Steve Duprey. Everyone in the room knows Steve. Sorry. It's a little more early in the morning. Steve grew up in North Conway, New Hampshire. And at one point, I think Steve was the youngest member of the New Hampshire State Legislature. Is that true, Steve?
That is true. Still true.
Back in the...
Sad, but still true.
Steve's a graduate of Cornell University Law School in 1978. He's a member of the New Hampshire Bar. He practiced law, was a partner at Sullivan & Hollis back in the day, and began full-time employment with his own companies developing and managing real estate throughout New Hampshire. He currently serves as the owner of a real estate management company, hotel and conference center management and ownership, and several commercial office developments centered in the Concord area. Steve serves on countless local boards and commissions, too many to go through right now, so I'll keep it short and sweet. So thank you folks for being here, and Councilor Todd, please take the podium.
Okay. Welcome everybody, and good morning. How's everybody doing today? Good? All right. Another sparkling day in Concord? Yes? Almost stole the mayor's catchphrase, but I had to put a little twist on it. So my thanks to all of you for attending this morning, and especially my thanks to the Greater Concord Chamber of Commerce. I think I don't need to tell all of you what an important role the organization plays in this community and has played for decades. And I'm especially gratified to be able to be here speaking with you on the 100th anniversary. So happy birthday to the Chamber and many more. Thank you for all the great work. So I've been asked to tell you about Penacook economic development, and I was advised to try to keep it to like 10 minutes. And many years ago, I probably could have done it in 3 or 2. And I probably would have had like the violin player in the background, just to set the mood, And I'm happy to say, though, now that the tone has totally changed. And you'll be the judge of that as we go through the presentation, but I think so. And so first, just to orient you to the places we'll be discussing, if you look at the map on this slide, that's I-93 is the red lines you see to the right side. And to the top of the picture, Whitney Road is just to the left of the highway. If you follow the red line down to the bottom of the map, and just to the left of that is Sewell's Falls Road. Village Street is where the yellow X is, kind of in the center of town there. Canal Street is a bit to the north of that, and then Merrimack Street is right next to Canal. So just to give you a little bit of an orientation. So fans of PowerPoint can now watch me break the 7x7 rule left and right here, but there's a lot of information, so I just wanted to give you some kind of an orientation, a little bit further orientation for you with some statistics here. Penacook, for those who don't know, I'm sure you all do, it's our village community at the northern end of Concord. The population is approximately 4,800 residents, which is about 12% of Concord's total population. The median income, just over $51,000. The existing businesses, we have approximately 200. Community organizations, there's a lot of them. The Penacook Community Center, they've been around for about 70 years. The Penacook Historical Society, also decades of service. The Penacook River Improvement Society, over 100 years, they've been in existence. And the Penacook Village Association is the only formally organized, active neighborhood association in the city of Concord, and they've been doing good work for about 10 years. So a very engaged, dynamic community. And I've left some out. There are others. There's the River Hill Grange. The Penacook also has a summer and a winter farmers market as well. So folks are very active and activated in the community. Schools, residents attend both the Merrimack Valley and Concord school districts, depending on which side of the road you live on. Most attend Merrimack Valley. And fun factoid, there's only one community in the U.S. Named Penacook, and we got it. So I always say that's good for branding. Next, we have briefly, now we're looking at kind of a little bit more of a development, from a development perspective, Penacook's challenges and strengths. The challenges are low traffic count. So Village Street, for example, we're talking about just over 7,000 vehicles per day average. Low foot traffic, low population density. The tax rate is confusing to a lot of people because we've got two school districts, and the Merrimack Valley School portion is actually a bit higher of a rate than the Concord School District. Lack of market absorption for existing commercial vacancies, and there are currently quite a few of them. Basically, what you've got here is a picture of lots of stagnation for decades since the close or move of industry. But the strengths are infrastructure investments, which is Village Street, Route 3. I really kind of look at that as one of the major focal points. This is all the work that was done several years ago, the roadway upgrades, the sidewalks, the lighting, the burying of power lines, the roundabout that was installed. Basically, just the same treatment that Main Street got with the Main Street project was done in Penacook on Village Street. And the TIF district, it's currently comprises actually two of the properties that I'm going to be discussing specifically with you today. Tremendously helpful, a real game changer. The community also is walkable and convenient to I-93. So good bones, I would say, all around. Next, Penacook is the sleeping giant of economic potential. That's my quote, actually. I'll be honest. And actually, I first said that in 2013 at a chamber event when I was running for city council. The candidates were up, and I said that, and I remember thinking, maybe people won't vote for me now because they're going to say, well, what did this guy just climb out from under a rock? Penacook is the sleeping giant. What's he talking about? But actually, I'm pleased to say the giant has awoken. And so, but it's a friendly giant. You don't have to run for your lives. It's a good thing. So Penacook actually has several former industrial sites at various stages of reuse and redevelopment, which is really a great thing to be able to say because we used to say at several stages of decline and decay. So now I think we're changing that story. But of course, challenges with these sites can also exist. You have the environmental contamination issues that can be present on a lot of them, but we've actually gotten pretty adept at working through those issues, and that's a testament to the talent of our city staff. So there they are on the screen, and we'll be running through each of them individually. First up is Penacook Landing. So now we're on Canal Street, and this is to be constructed by the Caleb Group. That's a Massachusetts company that specializes in affordable housing. They currently operate, I believe, 3 other properties in New Hampshire. You may recall the story. I'm not going to give you the long, sad saga of this story. It does have a happy ending here, of course, but this was originally the site of the Allied Leather Tannery business. It went out of business in the 80s. It sat vacant. A developer came in, tried to make a go of it with a multi-use development. That didn't work out. The city took it over. Then the main structure that was on the property collapsed. The city provided for environmental cleanup and marketing for years, and this was actually the only viable project that was presented to the city, but it's a good one. and it's going to get rid of the blight, and I think it's going to lead to other development in the village core, and importantly, provide residential, which is very much needed. Caleb, so the deal is Caleb has acquired about 2.5 acres of the 4-acre site in order to develop a 54-unit affordable housing development, and the remaining 1.5-acre parcel, which is actually along the water, has been set aside and held by the city with funding allocated to study putting in a new riverfront park there. The projected real estate tax payment is $115,000. The estimated new assessed value is $3 million. So this is actually going to be more than the Penacook Physicians building generates currently, at valued at $1.8 million. That's also on this site. And this is one of the properties that's in the TIF district. So I often get the question, well, how come the city didn't put a supermarket here? We tried, and there were no takers, basically. In fact, there was one point where the city offered to sell the property to a grocer for $1. No deal. And if you need to know why, we just go back 2 slides and you look under challenges. And those are the reasons: low traffic count, low foot traffic, low population density. But I'm aware, obviously, that especially if we're going to put in affordable housing in the community, we need better access to healthy food choices. So that leads us to Exit 17, mixed-use development. By interchange development, we know them as David and Lori Rossio. They're here with us this morning. Hi, folks. So there it is. It's happening. At 43 acres, this is actually one of the largest developments in Penacook, in the Penacook area, and it's at Route 4 and Whitney Road, of course, close to I-93, Exit 17. The background is that the Rossios have been property owners here on Whitney Road since 2005. They purchased the O.D. Hopkins building at number 2 Whitney, and that's currently 76,000 square feet, retrofitted into a multi-tenant Concord Crossing property. We may all be familiar with that. It currently has over a dozen manufacturing, office, and warehousing businesses, as well as the Concord Sports Center, which my kids have enjoyed, probably your kids too. In 2007, the Rossios entered into a long-term agreement with the Whitney family to purchase and develop 50 acres on both sides of Whitney Road. In 2013, one of the businesses we're familiar with, and that's in the upper left corner, is the mobile gas station and convenience store and Dunkin' Donuts. That store has proved to be one of the highest performing in that chain. In 2017, Lakes Region Tent and Event business built a 14,000 square foot building at 6 Whitney Road after outgrowing their former space at Concord Crossing. So we're developing, as the years go on, a lot of need and a lot of interest in this area. Spring of 2018, by the Rossios' request, 26.5 acres on Whitney Road got rezoned to Gateway Performance District. The rezoning allowed the site to be discussed with potential supermarket operators. And the site has municipal water and sewer. We're talking about 20,000 plus cars a day going by on Route 4. And of course the access to I-93. And it's also located in a state-designated economic revitalization zone. So the plan, as we see it, this is the proposal, as it's proposed here, that includes retail, restaurants, banking, and medical uses, as well as warehouse building space totaling 200,000 square feet. At this time, the 80,000 square foot supermarket space and 34,000 total square feet of retail space, that's what you see in the yellow boxes there, that is set aside for those tenants. And then the tan shaded building at the bottom is the industrial, proposed industrial use. That's actually in the industrial zone. You can see a little dividing line there in between. So the timetable, because everybody wants to know when they can begin shopping, right? The permitting efforts and design of Route 4 improvements are ongoing, and they're going to be completed in 2020. Construction is expected to start in 2020, and initial phases, including the supermarket, are targeted for 2021. And that would be the opening. So at full build-out, the proposed development will contribute an estimated $35 million to the tax base. So if we, these are the estimates, but if the project actually comes in at $35 million, residents get not only the local supermarket that they've always wanted forever, I've heard about this forever, but they also get a $2 reduction in the Penacook tax rate in the Merrimack Valley School District area. So in other words, if we round it up, if we say the current rate is $33, that would bring it down to $31 per 1,000 of valuation. So basically you're talking like on a $200,000 home, you save $250, and you can use it to go and buy groceries at the new store. So basically it helps overcome the Merrimack Valley District's higher rate. with city involvement, and it puts Penacook closer in line with what the Concord School District residents are paying. So if you look up win-win situation in the dictionary, I think you see that picture. That's what we're talking about. Next, the newspapers of New England. The owner is the Concord Monitor. They own the Concord Monitor. And there's the building that you see there. The building in 100 acres approximately for sale. It was listed in February of this year. And now we're on Sewell's Falls Road. You can see that there to the left. This is 77,330 square feet of office warehouse space built in 1989. The Whitney Road extension, if built, would end here. So what's been happening with that? Well, the Concord Monitor is preparing to submit an application to the Concord Planning Board shortly for a minor subdivision of the Monitor building on 103 acres of land to allow for the sale of the one Monitor Drive with the 3-story office industrial separate from the adjacent land parcels. So once approved, the subdivision is going to include easements and rights-of-way that will provide for future extension of Whitney Road. And then an additional benefit to the proposed subdivision, and this is the part that's really important to me, is that it will enable the Concord Monitor to thoughtfully and strategically develop the remaining land or sell the land to a conscientious developer with a vision for the site that will be beneficial to folks in Concord. Ultimately, we're going to need to do some mini master planning along this entire corridor to help maximize the potential and create sensitive development. Excuse me, but we'll need to continue to work on the funding mechanism, obviously, for road construction, and we'll want to have all the interests at work, basically. Everybody working as a team, I think, going forward will be important. But we can do that. The city staff and city manager are good at coordinating these kinds of efforts, and city council so far has been supportive and interested in exploring the planning of the extension. So on a somewhat related topic, we're still on Newspapers of New England, but now we're in a different location. The former Riverside Millwork Corporation headquarters closed in 2007. We know it as RIVCO. This is Merrimack Street that we're on now. We have 200,000 square feet total. Newspapers of New England entered an initial lease of 42,000 square feet, plus more was added to accommodate additional operations and storage needs. The presses from Lebanon were moved here. And so you've got more local jobs created in Penacook, in our local economy. The picture actually on the right doesn't really do it justice. The machinery is massive and really impressive. As for development of the remainder of the property, there was talk of proposed apartments. You probably have read about that in the paper. And townhouses maybe to be built on the remainder, but no update yet and no plans submitted. And this property is also in the Penacook TIF district. So last but certainly not least, we're on Village Street for this 65,000 square foot building that used to house Beede Electrical Instruments. It was in business for almost 100 years in Penacook. It closed in 2014, 35 jobs lost, and after it was actually bought by a Connecticut company who moved the operations to Connecticut. By the way, that's no forgiveness on loans and no environmental remediation offered by the state of New Hampshire were the reasons cited for it leaving to Connecticut. But states like Connecticut, of course, have a higher tax base, so competition is tough. And but I'm digressing. So that's a topic for another meeting, Tim, another chamber event. So what happened here? Basically, building owner Walter Pelletier dies. The property goes through an estate. The new owner is Dee Russell. They make attempts to sell the building. That fails. Dee Russell tries to lease it up, and so hold on to your seats. Within a year, it's almost at full occupancy. So I have to say, I never thought that it was going to be possible, that it could have been pulled that off, but she did it, and she did certainly have some help. We have Beth and Paul Morissette of Regal Auction Services, in business 30 years. As it so happens, they're just at that time losing their space in Franklin, and they take hold of 20,000 square feet here. The Morissettes then help the building become functional again and find additional tenants with assistance from the city. So the remaining 50,000 square feet are now Cheney's Apple House Furniture for warehouse storage, Crown Auctions, Don Palm HVAC, and E-Cars. And, as Laura Miller had pointed out, 8,000 square feet that you see in the front of the building is going to become the makerspace home for Making Matters New Hampshire in, hopefully, January, you'd said, right? So what that's going to mean is shared workspace for artisans. Possibly it's going to include some classroom space, workshop, prototyping lab, electronics lab, fiber arts, with a focus on serving small businesses and entrepreneurs through classes and events. They may also expand the prototyping labs with high-tech equipment and add a commercial kitchen and a metal shop. And then they can all get out there and help cut the shrubs down a little bit so they can see what they're doing when they're in the building. But lots of ideas and potential, and Creative Concord, right? Also, I should mention too, in the former, kind of in the lines of having makerspace as a tenant, the community mindedness of this, the cafeteria section of Beede will be turned into a small function gathering area for local businesses and nonprofits, and free dance classes are also planned because Dee Dee Russell is, you guessed it, a dance instructor. And so, again, community minded and really a big success story. I mentioned contamination issues earlier, and there's a continuously operating environmental remediation system in place here, and a trust fund was set up to operate it. There are apparently some questions about the status of the trust fund, and that needs to be resolved, and hopefully that will happen. So, in conclusion, I see a bright horizon for Penacook, and there's a lot more that I really don't have time to tell you today, but just some final thoughts for now. On the bullet points we have here, growing pains, former industrial to new vision. What will the community look like? We're basically transitioning from a 1950s industrial picture where everyone remembers how bustling and happy everything was on downtown Village Street, formerly Main Street there in Penacook. But you know, we can have that bustle again, but it's not the driver, the engine of that is not going to be industry. So how do we get through that transition? Fortunately, we have the community groups that I mentioned to volunteer and help provide input and assistance during that transition. And we generally see, as I've mentioned, positive signs all around. We've got the additional jobs, we have the housing element, we have the commercial development, all happening at once, which is really, I think, ideal. It's a terrific combination. And that leads to tax base expansion and added assessment income. So we do have some properties that remain problematic in Penacook, including a big question as to the viability of the Wheelabrator operation, which is the largest taxpayer. But overall, I would say looking good, and we can continue to utilize the advantages of the Penacook TIF district and what that provides. The local jobs added, I would say ditto on that. We're making some really good progress. Focus on major commercial and residential. I just want to bring that up to emphasize it again, that we can't allow ourselves to be tricked into thinking that the focus in Penacook should only be on business development. Penacook, we're at 1.4% vacancy rate in all of Concord right now in terms of housing. So keeping the emphasis on providing opportunities for both business and residential, I think, is vital. The two go hand in hand. They are not mutually exclusive. And with hundreds of thousands of additional square feet of commercial and industrial potential that I pointed out to you here this morning, this is going to remain a growing need for, there's going to be a growing need for housing that's going to continue, and not a shrinking one. And so when we talk about attracting and retaining young professionals, and all that, just as we talk about the makerspace, housing is just as important as our community centers and those other elements. So I just want to quickly say that there's also a catch housing project under development. We don't have anything to show about on that yet, but that will mean more traffic and additional housing to come in Penacook. Downtown businesses do benefit, the existing ones, and the creative ones like K-Place. And we believe that's going to eventually lead to filling those vacant storefronts in Penacook. And cooperation, and Tim's standing there, and I know I got to get off the, but I just have to read you, give me 2 more minutes because I have to read you this quote. It's so fantastic. Cooperation is really key. I've mentioned it already this morning. This is a message that I received from Paul Morissette, who you'll recall, that's of Regal Auctions, the guy that was in Franklin, moved to Concord. And here's what he said. The city of Concord was instrumental in forward thinking when we brought our plans to fill that empty building. That's the Beede building. They were both proactive and cooperative, and for once in my development life, were a municipality that was a pleasure to work with. Without the city, and of course, without the new tenants, this building would have frozen up last December and would now require a wrecking ball instead of welcoming new businesses. Kudos to everyone. What else can I say? That's perfect. So thank you. I'm done.
Thank you. That was really a terrific Penacook update. Thank you very much, Brent. And now, City Economic Development Director Suzi Pegg.
So, thank you for opening up this great presentation, and thank you again to the Chamber for inviting us here today. And congratulations on your anniversary. Anyway, I've been with the city's Economic Development Director now for just over 2 years, and I want to use this presentation to give you an overview on what we're doing, what we're focusing on, and our marketing efforts. So, the 3 pillars of the Economic Development Plan are there. Firstly, it's very important to look after what you have in the city. You know, retain and expand the business base you have. I want to be the person that if there's an issue going off with the business in the city, I want to know about it. And I use my connections to give me the eyes and ears where I can't be there, because I want to talk to those companies and keep them here. And if they want to expand, I want them expanding here, not somewhere else. I also want to attract new business investment, that's new tax bases, and I'm using various methods to do that too. Concord does have some of its challenges there, but you know, we can work it through together, but slowly by slowly I'm getting the interest out there. I'm talking to people outside of Concord about the opportunity here, and I hope we get some successes soon. And the third bit of that is we need workforce. We have a very low unemployment rate. Anyone looking at New Hampshire in general will see, well, we've got, you know, there's no workforce. Why should we move to New Hampshire? That is a challenge. But I think Concord has so many assets, and I'll talk about them later, of what we are as a whole 360 to be attractive to people that want to live, work and play in a place like Concord. So I think it's important to also be a very proactive partner with the business community. And I want to talk to you about the Teetotaler project. There you go. If you've not seen this video, I'm not going to play it for you today, but you should see them. They're a unique company. I love them to death. And I'm really, really happy that they actually chose Concord. And this actually was a very interesting way of how they came to come here. First of all, they came and met with me and Tim. And they said, we're interested in Concord. Can you help us? Yeah, we'll see what we've got. Now, for them, they need an interesting space. So I put them in contact with people such as Steve. And at that time, there was no space that was really could suit their particular, what they were looking for. But eventually, some space came available through Steve on Warren, and he's able to find the perfect location. And I'm hoping they will be opening up on Warren Street probably beginning of the year. But if they keep coming and doing events here in Concord, so if you see them, you'll know who they are when you see them. Say hi, welcome. We nearly had the drag queens go down on Morecambe Mile, but they decided, no, not quite yet. They'll bring the drag queens for another event. But they're a delight, they really are. So we are very proactive in the business outreach. This year we actually did our first international business attraction visit to Quebec. So me and the Deputy City Manager Carlos went proactively to talk to companies about the opportunity here in Concord. They were very interested in us. They never thought about us in a business context because they've been here as visitors and they love us. But then they suddenly realised that we're on this whole great distribution interstate system. We're not that far from their home base, and depending on how the Canadian-US trade agreements, non-agreements, not sure what to call it just yet, could mean that they open a second office here. And I'm in continual contact with them, asking them how things are going. Like anything else, you've got to nurture it. You know, it's a bit like dating. You've got to start and have a cup of tea first, see how things go, then they come and have a look, and you know how it goes. But eventually, I hope we get one of those companies here in Concord. So I also created an economic development plan as well, which it's a three to 5 year one based on the 3 pillars of that you saw earlier. And alongside that was really important was to do a marketing toolkit and a brand. We didn't have a brand. We had no brand for Invest Concord. And so we had to start doing something like that. The website is actually the shop front. You know, people, companies, site selectors, they look for the website. The current city website, great if you're a taxpayer, you want to know what's going on there in the city, but for a business or a site selector, it didn't work. So we actually created a whole new website and marketing toolkit for that. And I'll show you the landing page of the website in a bit. And we've been doing a lot on social media. We have a new PIO on board. We work very closely, her and I. And if you've not looked at some of our social media feed, I suggest you have a look and kind of follow us on Facebook or Instagram. And we're also doing city podcasts as well, and they're getting a lot of hits as well. So, look out for those and really follow us and share the good news. And we just need to raise the profile of the city to potential investors and developers. That's the most important thing. So the overall economic development performance, I would say actually the biggest challenge we've got is we don't have enough housing. National vacancy rate is 7%. The rate throughout the whole northeast is 5%, which is generally considered a sign that supply and demand are balanced. But Concord has a vacancy rate of 1.4 for two-bedroom apartments. That concerns me, because if I want to attract people here, I have nowhere to put them. I have nowhere for them to live, and that's an issue. Office space, we're saturated with average to below average offerings. I call them the B- office space. We could do with better office space, Class A office space. And conversion of these spaces to co-working spaces, which we've already got the sim checks looking at doing one in Concord, all mixed uses with retail, residential, I think would be very good for this city if we're looking at forward development. Industrial facilities, the present inventory is really bad. There is not enough ceiling heights, clean space, and that's what a modern day industrial facility looks like. I don't see much of this here in Concord, and that's a challenge. And as we move into robotics, it's called Industry 4.0. A lot of manufacturers are using robotic technology now. They need the spaces, they need the ceiling heights. It's a low employment facilities because they've got the robots, but they do look for clean spaces like this. So that's what I'd love to see here in Concord. So marketing. I just talked about the podcasts. They're fun. Me and Stephanie do them together or separately. We also have guest speakers from General Services. So have a look at those and see what we're up to. The website in particular is very important for the businesses. And that's the landing page of the Invest Concord. And I would encourage you to look at that because there's some great information on that. We keep it very much updated with information. And I've had nothing but kudos from people looking at this from outside of the city. They like it. The most important thing, though, is they have access to me straight away. If people have to keep digging to find me, we're in trouble. So at any point on the website or whenever they can have access to me, they know how to follow me on social media and they can get to me straight away. So this is really important when you're talking about workforce and attracting companies. The quality of place is really, really becoming a very top feature for people who are wanting to look where they want to live and work. And so I think what we have here is we have a new urban living for the city. And I think we've got one of the most desirable communities in New Hampshire. We keep being given awards. We've recently won the American City and County Crown Communities winner. Wallet Hub keeps cited as one of the top communities to live. We just keep getting this. So people are hearing this, and we send this out through social media hits as well. And people, I hear them when I'm in restaurants or coffee shops. They say we're visitors, but we'd like to live here and explore it more. So just back to the recreational activities, this is again important for this. We have 80 plus miles of trails, and we have new ones that have been added. We've got parks, public parks and pools. The Merrimack Lodge is now open. Access to rivers. I mean, the list is endless. And a citywide community centre. And if you've not looked at any of the new programmes at the citywide community centre, I encourage you to do that. I had a pound class there, and my God, I love it. But if they're so, what we do with sticks and pounding the community centre floor, they'll be a little bit concerned. But if you want to learn languages, if you want to do something, look at what the community centre is doing. And again, I think we're becoming the new urban living. People want to live here. So what's new? Skate House, I've talked about that earlier, the Merrimack Lounge. It's a unique space which you can rent. I suggest you have a look at that. If you've got something coming up, a family event, you want a unique space, that's a fantastic event. We now have a tent out at the golf course where you can hold events as well. It's beautiful space. I suggest a look at that. Our private sector's launched the co-working space. On the recommendation of the city, we actually had an incubator study, and on the basis of that study, they actually have started to open up that space in the Concord Hotel. And we actually also had a resources guide, 2 lots of resources guide done for the city. So if you're in HR, a company, you want to give people information on the city, they want to attract people here, go on our website and look for the resources guide, because they're downloadable PDFs that you can send to people, tells the story of our city and what amenities we have here. So opportunities. I think we continue to invest in infrastructure as a city, you know, things like road improvements, park improvements, that kind of thing. We continue to do that investment. In planning, they're nearing the completion of phase 1 of a new phone-based code. If you want to know more about that, I suggest you go on Concord Next and look at that. We've eliminated impact fees for non-residential construction. That was a big thing for us because it was being held against us if we looked at other communities in New Hampshire. Getting rid of those has been good. And renewable energy goals. I mean, we already get 100% of our energy from the renewable sources for the city, but I think that's a big step forward as well. Green energy, being seen as a green city, is important too. So that's my presentation for today, and thank you for listening. I've kind of tried to cover a lot in a short time, and but I hope you found it informative, and I'm happy to answer questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzi. And we're going to have Steve Duprey come up, and then we'll take some questions from the floor, so be thinking of what you'd like to say. Steve?
I'll cede all my time to Brent and Suzi. I'll be really brief, just sort of big picture and what I see happening. I'm biased, but I think downtown's where it's at. If you look at Concord over the last 20 years, there's been no significant industrial base expansion on a global sense. In fact, there's been contraction. That's not uncommon. That's happening all around New Hampshire. And I think with the revitalization of downtown, the urban core is what the millennials are looking for, places to live, work, stay, play. So I think it's wise for the city to keep investing in downtown. Hindsight's always 100%, but I think the city made a grave mistake in the 80s when we took our industrial land in Chanel and Regional Drive, and we allowed office uses up there. A great case in point was the Municipal Association. I remember talking to the leadership at the time I was redeveloping the Pillsbury building, and they said, well, we can go up behind Target on a sandy lot, buy it cheaper, build a wood frame building, and our effective rent will be $3 a square foot less than it would be to redevelop what we'd have to pay in your redeveloped Blue Cross Blue Shield. But now there are over 1,000 office workers up there, and then when Nanocomp, a company I worked with because it was founded by a professor in Dartmouth and a businessman in Merrimack, we convinced them to take some space in Concord when they first started, when they needed 100,000 square feet of manufacturing space. They couldn't really find a location that worked for them in Concord. So hindsight's 100%, but that helped drain the downtown, which I don't think was good, and it also made it difficult to find space that was readily available for industrial. But hindsight's 100%. My view is that downtown development yields a surplus. If you take something like the Smile Building, almost $400,000 in taxes. We had 2 police calls last year and 3 ambulance calls. I don't think the Smile Building puts many kids in school. I remember Dave and John Constance's father, I teased him the other day, showing up at the planning board objecting to me building the Smile and Bindery building because it was going to close off that lane of parking for a year. Every time I go into Constantly Pizza now, Dave and John give me free pizza, and I had to tease the old man and say, hey, it worked out pretty well for you, and he even admitted it. But I think Concord has, there's a triple whammy happening in New Hampshire. Steve Norton, before he left the Public Policy Institute, did a study that was ostensibly about education, but it pointed out a triple whammy that's happening around the state. Most school districts are seeing declining enrollments, which mean home values, big homes on School Street, go down in value. Concord's a little bit of an exception to this. At the same time you're seeing declining enrollments, you're seeing increasing school costs, which then in turn raises the tax burden on those lesser valued now homes. And most communities do not have an economic development plan. The large cities do. Concord's, I think, was behind, is now not behind, but it's competition, not only state versus state, it's city versus city. And Concord is wise to know that. We're in competition with Manchester, Portsmouth, Nashua, Derry, Hopkinton, you name it. We want to try and get our share and more of the economic pie. We have some other advantages. The Carsey Institute just finished their study, and there were a couple interesting things there. Would you know that the median age is lower here than it is in Portsmouth? That we have more people under 18 here than they do in Portsmouth. So we've got a lot going on that I think are seeds of good future growth. A couple things, I start with a patient analogy. I admire the work that Penacook's doing. I think you start with the patient, you keep the heart and the brain strong, and then you worry about the fingers and the legs. So I think it's imperative Concord keep investing heavily in downtown and look for incentives to develop downtown. You might want to discount that because I own a lot of space here. I also will take one point of contention with Suzi on the office space, needing more A space. The fact is, our rents are almost 30% lower than they are in Manchester for A space, 30%, and almost 40% lower than they are in Portsmouth. There is not great demand for A space. There's a reason Mike Simchick decided to build a Hotel Concord in 2 floors of office space that was having difficulty leasing, which is beautiful space with a garage adjacent to it. So I think you have to find the users who then want the space. I always do it backwards. I find the users, then build a building, not build a building and wait for it. Here's what I think is going to happen in Concord in the next 12 to 24 months. I hope that we'll finally be able to get a permanent agreement with the state so that we can have access to the State House in a few key months, because that's our main tourism attractor. If we're ever going to build a tourism business, we need to have access to that State House on weekends. I think Mark Zabrowski, hopefully we'll get the Phoenix Hall redeveloped, adding one more cultural venue. We have more cultural venues in Concord than they do in Portsmouth, Manchester, Nashua, or any other city. We need to promote that. I think the city will, even though there's been a step back, these have all been vetted. I'm really repeating what the mayor and city manager told me to say. The deployment security will be redeveloped. That's a great site and something will work out there. I'm being paid $1 a year by the state of New Hampshire, and there's some on the facilities committee who think I'm grossly overpaid, but I do think that the state is going to move forward on a new legislative garage and perhaps a new office for the Attorney General at the old New Hampshire Savings Bank headquarters. And again, I'm biased because now I own 7 Eagle Square, and I get every morning, including this morning, to walk under the garage and visit with some of our more transient residents. That once that garage disappears, I think that's going to make Store Street really viable. A bit of history. I was in the legislature on the Committee on Legislative Administration when we negotiated with the city to build that garage. And the city council, it was not the mayor, a city councilor, Marty Gross, was just like matter in hell to think that the state would take property off the tax rolls. So the brilliant idea at the time was to build a garage over a street, and Dick Dudley designed it, and he actually convinced us that it was a portable garage, that you could take it apart in sections and slide it south on Store Street. Seemed to be a great idea at the time. And I also think, so I think the state's going to work forward to that, because that garage is not only functionally obsolete, it's physically obsolete. And they've realized that spending money to keep that and maintain it's a bad idea. That's going to make Store Street and our whole frontage from 93 look a lot better. And I think the city fathers and leadership will get the 93 corridor decided. I hope within the next 3 years we'll have city control of Stickney Avenue, because I think that's the greatest economic development opportunity the city will have over the next decade. And with the form-based zoning, we'll start to realize that if you want more housing downtown, you really have to increase density. As an example, I'll show you the site that is on the corner of Warren and Green Street, Harold Ekstrom's site, which I think was zoned for about 30 units, 25 or 30 units. When you did elderly or senior housing, over 55, you could get up to 38. And there's a great architecture firm in Dallas, Texas called Humphrey Partners. They specialize in mixed-use development. I showed them that land and said, what could you build on that site if you were doing it in Dallas? And they said 80 units. And you can't, I can just tell you about building market rate apartments. It costs the same thing to build in Concord as it does in Portsmouth. Our residential rents are 65% of what they are in Portsmouth. You cannot, we can't buy steel cheaper, we can't buy concrete cheaper, our carpenters aren't cheaper. The only place you can make a difference at the margin in housing prices, short of subsidies, which NEFA and HUD work on and Catch uses, is at the land cost and increasing density. So that's something Concord's going to have to deal with. Obviously, our challenges, I think we need to spend more on marketing Concord. We're in competition with other towns, but I think Concord has a lot going for it. I love the slide that 10 years ago, every town around Concord had a lower tax rate. Now only one does, and that's because of a racetrack. That's a testament to great financial management from the city manager and the council. That is huge. I think another challenge is our surge in homelessness. I think other communities are sending homeless here, and we're a very generous and caring community, but that causes some issues. And then frankly, even though we are very, and I've had this discussion with Chris Rath, our retired superintendent, families moving into state go where there are good schools for their kids. Concord's always had great schools, and among cities, we always had the highest test scores. We're also the biggest and most welcoming community to new Americans, many of whom are good friends of mine and a big part of our workforce, and I think they make Concord and New Hampshire a lot better place. But when they come into the school system, because many of them are coming literally from refugee camps after a 30-day stop in Germany, in 4th grade testing and 8th grade testing, that has had a tendency to lower our test scores. Now, Chris will tell you if we did a test of people in 12th grade, they catch up and probably surpass a lot of our native born, but we don't test that. So when people are moving in from out of state and they're thinking, do I move to Hopkinton or Bow or Concord, I think Concord suffered because of that. Just shortly, what I'm working on, the garage project at $1 a year for the state. I think it's a 2-year contract, so I think I got about another 8 months to go. They ignore most of my advice, and so it's working out well for both of us. I'm going to finish the hotel down at Exit 12. We're looking at a smaller, boutique-y type hotel, more on the hostel end for younger travelers. We're still working on families in transition, for the record. If anybody wants first-class office space in a beautiful old building, see me. The effective rent's about $39 a foot, but it would be spectacular space. We had one party very interested in moving the building. They gave up on it. We've offered to move it at no cost and give it. We're also looking at perhaps relocating it on site, redeveloping that site. I grew up with Alex Ray, the common man, so he and I are working on a project there. We're kicking around a few ideas for the employment security site, but in order for that site to be successful, it has to be mixed-use development, and you have to have 20 to 30 to 40,000 feet of commercial office users, in my opinion, who'll pay the rent, that build the infrastructure and the steel that you then put housing on, because then you have a free site. My whole argument earlier, lower land cost. We're going to redo Capitol Plaza. You know, it's a great spot. I love the building. It's one of the projects, legal projects I worked on 40 years ago, but it's a little dark. We're going to try and the umbrellas that we put up there a couple years ago got more Facebook likes than almost anything else that's ever been posted in Concord. And I'm going, wow, that was pretty simple, but I haven't had many other ideas after that other than the pink flamingos. But we're going to try and relight and re-liven that space in conjunction with the city's garage. And then we're looking at possible expansion of the Grapponi Conference Center. My dream for Concord is if we get control of Stickney Avenue, I think Concord, when we first started talking about building a convention center, conference center, and did the study, we were way ahead of Manchester. Manchester saw us coming. They sort of leaped ahead. I think they may be regretting that now as they're having a hard time with their bonds on what was called the Verizon Center, now the SNU Center. But I do think there is a market. Trade show centers don't make money, but they attract a lot of people. The only trade show center is the old Armory in Manchester. I think there will be another trade show center in the southern tier. There'll be one in this state. I think Concord should take the lead, and we should have a 90 to 100,000 square foot trade show center on the Stickney Avenue site, which will help Concord, help downtown. Wouldn't be bad for me either, but that's incidental. That's all I know and more.
Thank you, Steve. And we do have a few minutes for some questions from the audience, and I see Glenn Curry putting his hand right up, so go ahead, Glenn.
It's for either Steve or Suzi. All of this second upper floor space in the older buildings in downtown, do we have any plan of how to better utilize some of that space?
Well, I'll take first stab, and I'll just tell you, I think Concord's done a good job trying to deal with flexibility in the code. A lot of people don't realize that Concord sits on the second most significant earthquake fault in the United States. And when you redevelop a building, you have to bring it up to earthquake codes. When I did the Blue Cross Blue Shield building over, the earthquake beams in the basement are 6 feet by 6 feet wide. And when it was built, it was never built that way. By the way, careful in a big storm, don't go under the Store Street garage, because there is no lateral earthquake bracing then. That was, I didn't think of those sort of things back in '75 or whatever. So just be far away. So there are code issues that make it hard. Your per square foot cost to develop upper stories is tougher. I bought the old Academy of Applied Science, for those who've been around a long time, Apple Tree bookstore site on Warren Street, because I wanted to make sure it was retail on the first floor, not more office. And we're going to do over the upper floor. By the way, if anybody's looking for a 1,700 foot, 2-bedroom, 2-bath study condominium, we're going to have a great one there, unit, residential unit, but your development costs are about 35% higher to do upper floor versus ground floor. So it's been a daunting challenge. And the problem is our rent structure in Concord, you know, everybody talks about a 1.4% vacancy. That's true. But you can't really command a rent for new construction or rebuild that matches your cost.
There you go.
In my view.
Suzi, anything to add to that?
I think I agree with what Steve says, but there's a lot of buildings owned by people in the city, so it's not, we can't enforce if a building owner owns it and doesn't want to bring it up to spec, we can't do anything. I mean, hands are tied really, but you were right from the building
I
side.
mean, we talk about space availability, there's a lot there, but we can't seem to find any way around using it. I mean, the Oddfellows Hall and some of these other places.
I still own a condominium unit on Hills Avenue, which Duncan McGowan redeveloped into that great property. It's 1,100 square feet, it's 2-bedroom, 1-bath, great unit. In Portsmouth, that would rent for, above Portwalk, that rent would be $2,700 a month. In Concord, I get $1,400. So why would I spend $100,000? If you're a landlord owning one of those buildings, why would you spend $100,000 to upgrade it if you aren't going to get it in rent?
Pretty much answers that question, Glenn. Suzi, I had a question for you, and anyone else can jump in, but Concord has sort of a, we haven't been very successful, I think, in the past in terms of partnering with the State Business and Economic Affairs Department, formerly DRED. We've got a relatively new commissioner in there. What is the prospect for us really, you know, gaining a stronger partnership with them in terms of attracting more economic development to the Concord area?
Okay, one of the first things I did when I joined the team is I reached out to the new commissioner. In my previous role in Pennsylvania, I worked very closely with the state. It's work in progress. They've been used to doing things in a certain way in their office. I'm trying to get them to think differently, that if we have a prospect looking at Concord, the first person they talk to is me. So I'm pushing that envelope very strongly with Taylor because I think it's very important that we work together, not in isolation. It's work in progress. That's really where we are with that.
On the plus side, Taylor comes to us from the CDFA. Before that, he was with HUD. Before that, with Bill Zelliff, working on economic development. And he understands redevelopment in New Hampshire, and he's the main reason why the new department's headquartered directly across the street from the State House. Because regardless who's governor, it's pretty handy when you have a prospect coming in to the governor and meet them and say, let's walk across the street and we'll have every commissioner you need to speak to in one place. That was, I think, a great move by the state and good for Concord.
Thank you. One more here. Steve, you alluded to I-93 a little bit, and you and Phil Hastings, who's here with us today, our former board chair, have been representing the chamber on a city committee that has been dealing with state DOT. Could you give a little bit of a background in terms of the bullet that we've dodged and where we may be heading at this point?
Well, again, the heavy lifting's done by the mayor and the city manager on this, but DOT believes in building roads. And I love it when the commissioner says, well, we need to build more roads because we want economic development in Pittsburgh, New Hampshire. I go, where's Pittsburgh, New Hampshire? Who cares? If the road ends in Concord, I'm a happy guy. You know, and they go, who's this Neanderthal? But their whole focus is moving traffic. And Concord, thanks to the work done with 2020 and a lot of other studies since then, has said no. You know, the severance of the city from the river which back at the time the Merrimack River wasn't a place you really wanted to be on, given sewage treatment and things like that, made sense, doesn't make sense now. And it really is a detriment to Concord that we're not connected to the river. So again, the city leadership has done a great job when DOT tried to push through a plan that I think was perhaps great from a transportation standpoint, but not nearly sensitive enough to what Concord needs. There was the special committee of the executive councilors saw that. We've been working with the consultants and DOT, and I think they've taken a step back, which is smart. And I have faith that through a long process, DOT and the legislature will decide that it's not just a transportation project, it's the key project for the state capital, the most important city in New Hampshire from many perspectives, and that we'll get a project that connects us, has significant connection to the river, helps DOT achieve its objective of moving traffic north, but doesn't become this wall that divides the city from the river. So I think we're making progress. Again, sometimes the goals of what transportation tries to do and what they think they can afford and what Concord thinks we need and should have are different, but I think we'll get there.
My opinion is that that is a crucial project that will have as much impact, either negative or positive, as the downtown redevelopment had in a positive way. So
Much more.
watching that
It's
very, very
the
carefully.
most important project for Concord in the next half century.
Tim, could I add one
Please.
thing quickly? I agree with everything Steve said, and also the bitter irony here is that the city and other entities have done studies over the years which are and have been available to the DOT, and those were largely ignored. And all of those studies show the impacts of the highway widening on the community, and they also show what the community has felt was important to them in terms of this project. So, basically, I think that so far we've been on a track where we want to build a highway, like Steve said, we're going to build a highway for transportation, and we're just going to do this project as cheaply as we can. We're going to ignore everything else. And so I think kudos to the committee and the city for stopping that in its tracks, because if we don't, as Steve, I agree again, this is going to be the most important thing that's facing us upcoming. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions from the floor? Oh, Laura.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to, now that I work at NHTI, Concord's Community College, I get to bring my economic development background over there. And it's just a piece that wasn't really mentioned was the workforce. And that we have a low unemployment rate, but even when you can find workers, a lot of them need training. And I think, especially in the business community, the community colleges have that resource and we're often forgot about. We're even forgot about in Concord. We go past Delta Dental and it stops, you come on Fort Eddy and it stops, and the community college is right there. And with state funding dropping to the community colleges and unemployment, we have those technical skills and those retraining for workers. So when people are looking to relocate in Concord, or they're looking for workers, or they're looking for additional training, the community colleges, not just us, but our 7 sister colleges, though I don't care as much about them as obviously Concord, but we have those resources, the clean manufacturing, we have the manufacturing programs and IT and all those other high technical skills and programs at the community colleges that people forget about or don't know about. So the college wants to work and promote economic development in the city, and we're here as that resource.
And I'll just come back at you because one of the things, and we talked about that just earlier, your new president, I really think I have worked with her when in Pennsylvania, where we worked with the college and our Southwestern Pennsylvania to work with companies and the workforce. I think it's something that's missing here, and it's something that's definitely on my radar screen, and I think it's a conversation that we definitely need to have going forward, because one of the things I used to do, especially on the international companies, say that they were coming in and they needed a workforce trained on clean manufacturing, for example. We worked with the community college to put up that course. The company paid for that training, and then they got the workers straight back into their workforce. So it's something that I think we're lagging here, but it's something that's definitely on my radar screen, and we'll have that conversation.
Can I make a comment too on that?
Go ahead.
I would love to see more of an NHTI, Concord Community College presence in the downtown, because I'm afraid that out of sight is out of mind.
Right.
You know that this is something that I've discussed with you and with Brent briefly. I think it's a multiple pronged approach, but we have the advantage of having 2 great institutions of higher education here. Unfortunately, we don't really see that presence, and we forget about it. So I also think that more visibility would be very healthy for the relationship.
This is on a tangent, but I'll tell you one thing that I see happening. We just got approached by a high-tech company that makes some kind of software that does something I have no understanding of, out of Manchester, looking for 10,000 feet. They want to be in a downtown. They've seen what Bitware does. They like that for their workers. And they're moving out of Manchester. So I asked, why are you leaving Manchester? That's, you know, the milliards, all the high-tech. And there's a feeling that Manchester, and I'm taking nothing away from those of you who may live, work, or stay in Manchester, is not as great a community. It's a larger city. It's got larger city problems. May have more diversity in restaurants, but they have neighborhood safety issues, school issues, fights over that. And this company actively said, we want to be in Concord because it's got a better vibe to it. It's got more culture right downtown. We think the schools are better, and, you know, not to pick on Manchester, but we should be down there recruiting every business in Manchester to come to safe, wonderful Concord.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
I'm Terry Page, the Transportation Director for the Community Action Program here in Concord and the Concord-Area Transit. And to jump on the workforce bandwagon, you're going to need some transportation for those folks that you want to bring in here into the city to work, because particularly if you're targeting the millennials and the younger folks, they don't want a car. So we need to really look at the transportation infrastructure beyond just roads and parking and what that looks like. You're going to need to provide some sort of transportation options, mainly transit, for people who want to get from point A to point B. And how do you connect to them correctly and efficiently? And can we build stuff in on the ground floor where it's less expensive instead of going backwards and saying, hey, we have this building, now bring the bus here. So I just like to put a plug in for thinking about infrastructure pieces to bring that workforce here and be more attractive in terms of the transit that you provide as well. Because we're ready to change and we want to change and we want to make it be part of the team that does that.
Good point. Any comments from the panel on that?
I've been sitting for over 10 years on the subcommittee, the Public Transit Subcommittee of the Transportation Policy Advisory Committee, and there are a lot of challenges associated, as you know, Terry, with expanding your routes. I think that CAT in Concord has made tremendous strides in those last 10 years. They've really focused sharply, including getting a special consultants report provided and done, and getting ridership surveys, and all of that work has gone into what is the need. And as you may recall, we also tried an experiment with Saturday service for a while. But all of those programs have a cost, and you need to have the ridership there. And so then you get into this sort of vicious circle of, you have the ridership, you want it, people want it, you need the cost, and then if the ridership doesn't show up, you're back in that same circle again. But I'm going to be glad to continue to work on that, because especially a lot of the discussion that I gave on Penacook, if we're talking about another development on exit 17, it's exactly what you said. Yes. The development goes in and then the bus goes in. Right. We can try harder to be a little bit more proactive in that, because it is an important element. And if I could just also add the other element, I'll beat this drum again, workforce housing. So workforce training, but without workforce housing, we're nowhere. People are not going to be able to afford to they can get the jobs in Concord, they cannot stay here because they can't afford to live here.
All right, we are out of time. I want to thank our panelists. That was an excellent presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming, and we will see you at the next chamber event.
Thanks.
Steve, thanks.
Thanks, you bet. Thank you.